Fam, something serious here.
So this is really serious,
okay.
you guys. Ellen DeGeneres.
Oh, my Lord.
Beloved Ellen DeGeneres hung out with George W. Bush. And people were really upset. So here's a little backstory. Ellen had booted Kim Burrell, who is a gospel singer who was supposed to sing with Fiorella at her show in 2017 for saying homophobic remarks both on Facebook and in a video that went viral of her doing gospel. But that same year, Ellen also had George Bush on. So this isn't anything new in 2017 and prior and during up until this time. Ellen and George Bush have a friendship. She calls him her friend, and they actually hang out. So fast forward to now, they were at a Cowboys versus, I don't know, the cheese one, the cheese team.
Packers.
Packers. Yeah. A Cowboys versus
the cheese team. They
were playing the cheese illiterate team. I am when it comes to these sports.
But you know the Patriots suck, right?
I do know the Patriots.
And the Jets
suck.
are awesome.
The Jets suck too.
Right,
so anyway, so they were over there and they were laughing, and there was a short video. I think that got taken down because I had retweeted it, but it got taken down. And they were like having a great time. He was there with his wife. She was there with her wife. Blah, blah, blah. So you all recall that George W. Bush was completely homophobic, anti-LGBT. That is a very important point to make. So it's kind of hypocritical of her to be hanging out with this guy who was pushing legislation against people like her. A lot of that doesn't even come up.
Yeah.
It doesn't, and like, you know, she stands against it, but then in her private life, she's friends with someone like that. It's really interesting. But here's her response when she defended her friendship with George Bush, and to me, it was very tone deaf and just dismissive.
So I want to talk about something that happened this weekend. I know it's Tuesday. Sometimes I like to ruminate on things all day Monday so that on Tuesday you hear about it. So this weekend I went to Dallas for the Cowboys game. And thanks. And it may not seem like a big deal for a celebrity to attend a football game, but I never leave my house, so it is a big deal. I go through the drive-thru at Wendy's, so I only have to see one person. I'm that kind of person. So there were 100,000 people in this stadium. Beautiful stadium, by the way, that Dallas has. So Portia and I were invited by Charlotte Jones. She's the daughter of Jerry Jones, who owns the Dallas Cowboys. And we went because we wanted to keep up with the Joneses. So anyway, so we get to sit in this very fancy suite because, you know, he owns the whole place. So his suite is fancy, and he's got fancy friends. And I don't mean fancy like Real Housewife fancy. I mean like fancy. Look, I took a video of who was next to me. So that was Portia, and that was Charlotte Jones. Portia was talking to, and George W. Bush, and then in front of us was the tallest man in the world. And so I've got to say, when we were invited, I was aware that I was going to be surrounded with people from very different views and beliefs. And I'm not talking about politics. I was rooting for the Packers, and get this, everybody in the Cowboys suite was rooting for the Cowboys. And so I had to hide my cheese hat in Portia's purse. And don't get me wrong, I like the Cowboys. I love the Cowboys. I love all the Village people, as a matter of fact. But Aaron Rodgers is a friend of mine. He's the quarterback for the Packers, and so I'm sitting in the Cowboys suite, the owner of the Cowboys, and secretly cheering every time the Packers scored, or every time another whistleblower came forward. And the referees, you guys, the referees. But during the game, they showed a shot of George and me laughing together, and so people were upset. They thought, why is a gay Hollywood liberal sitting next to a conservative Republican president? Didn't even notice I'm holding the brand new iPhone 11. And, but a lot of people were mad, and they did what people do when they're mad. They tweet, and but here's one tweet that I loved. This person says, Ellen and George Bush together makes me have faith in America again. And
lose faith in America.
Exactly. Here's the thing. I'm friends with George Bush. In fact, I'm friends with a lot of people who don't share the same beliefs that I have. We're all different, and I think that we've forgotten that that's okay that we're all different. For instance, I wish people wouldn't wear fur. I don't like it, but I'm friends with people who wear fur. And I'm friends with people who are furry, as a matter of fact. I have friends who should tweeze more. And but just because I don't agree with someone on everything doesn't mean that I'm not going to be friends with them. When I say be kind to one another, I don't mean only the people that think the same way that you do. I mean be kind to everyone. Doesn't matter. Even people who are already playing Christmas music. I mean, seriously. There's no excuse for that, but I'm kind to them. Anyway, I want to thank Jerry Jones, Charlotte Jones for hosting us, and thanks President Bush and Laura for a Sunday afternoon.
Okay.
Was anybody surprised?
I wasn't surprised at all.
She's
and here's
a neoliberal.
The thing. She is. And the thing is, she's definitely pro-Hillary. She's been pro-Hillary. She's had Bernie on her show. She's a nice person, like, in the sense of being like an entertainer. She's nice, whatever. I've been to her show. A lot of my actor friends and people in the entertainment industry just love her. She's just a likable person. Now, she is not a politician, so I'm not going to judge her in the way I judge a politician, but that was a very tone-deaf argument. That is saying, basically, you're equating people who wear fur to warmongers who have killed thousands and thousands, millions ultimately, of Iraqis. Yeah. You're and not only Iraqis, but Americans. I mean, George Bush was responsible for one of the deadliest wars America's ever fought, and that we are still reeling from. So to so many people, that was just so dismissive and so like, oh, I'm just gonna sit here in my elitist with my elitist warmongering friend, and it's not people you don't agree with. Sure, I agree. Let's be kind to everybody, even people we don't agree with. We always talk about that. We talk about talking to the other side, but she's literally putting a warmonger there and equating him to just someone with a different political view. And the thing is, the problem is that he hasn't been held accountable at all. So we can't really expect him to be shunned by society if the government and our government and our electeds haven't ever held him accountable either. Yeah. So there's that too. And sure, I completely disagree with her. I completely think that was an entirely awful thing. And I think, as someone who has so much influence, she has 87 million followers on Twitter. She's someone that has such a following.
Huge.
She is pretty much dismissive of the war crimes he has committed. She could have said something like, I understand why people are upset because he has committed these war crimes, and I think he should have been held accountable.
They will never say that. They will never say that.
Well, here's the thing. Ellen DeGeneres' net worth is approximately $450 million, says Armin Manoogian, and that should help explain the situation. She plays ball. You know what I'm saying? She plays ball, and she's always played ball with Hollywood, connected to the deep state, connected to all these people. Yep. It's one big group.
And you ain't in it.
You ain't in it, and Ellen is. What does Mark Ruffalo have to say, Johnny?
Mark Ruffalo says, sorry, until George W. Bush is brought to justice for the crimes of the Iraq War, including American-led torture, Iraqi deaths and displacement, and the deep scars, emotional and otherwise, inflicted on our military that served as folly, we cannot even begin to talk about kindness.
Exactly. We can't. And it's completely dismissive of all of that. And by the way, what Paso pointed out, I just want to reinforce that point. This is class elitism. This is a definition. Remember, it's surpassing homophobia. She doesn't care. It's surpassing any kind of social justice issues, because ultimately, at the end of the day, what divides us from Ellen and what connects Ellen and Bush is their elitism. We don't get invited to the luxury seats of the Dallas Cowboys suite. We don't, right? They do. They're going to see each other even if they don't want to. They're going to hang out in the same circles. It is the 99% versus the 1%, and it does not get any more clear than that. So where's the thing? I wanted to also show Tulsi's response now.
Before we go into that, I want to say, okay, so just talking about Ellen first then. Yeah. So we would like it if our celebrities would be informed and would tell the truth, right?
Right.
But they don't, because they're taking the corporate money. They're taking all the money and or
not just that.
What else?
Not just that. The moment you start being like a Mark Ruffalo or a Susan Sarandon and you start speaking out against this, they completely shun you. It is very difficult to get jobs. Yeah. You are this thing that is standing that is like almost they put you as like a non-progressive. You're like a party pooper. You're not with the in crowd. And when everybody else is like following that same line, it is hard. It's just like the journalist. It's just they're not going to find jobs. It's the same way. I'm not excusing it. I am simply saying that is the culture. You get blacklisted. You get treated like you're this thing. I mean, yeah. We've seen it. The only people that I've seen like really do hard work and still somehow manage to get roles here and there are Susan Sarandon, Mark Ruffalo, Francis Fisher, all of these people that are activists in the community, Rosario Dawson. But it's very, very few. Very, very,
and they're not even still getting a ton of work that they could be getting because of their opinions. And let's be honest, too. Ellen DeGeneres has been rich for a long, long time. Yeah. Bill Maher's been rich for a long, long time. When you're in your own echo chamber, in your own bubble, it's hard to see the suffering of the regular people every day that are really going to price for the policies like George Bush put into place when it came to war. When it also, he was very bad when it came to, he talked about possibly amending the Constitution when it came to gay marriage. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? That doesn't affect you. You have money. You're in your bubble, so you don't care. You're outside of that class of the people who are suffering. And these people like, you know, and I've said this before, you know, and we'll get into this a little bit more. Let me just wait off to the side because I have some stuff to say. I don't want to jump the gun, but go right ahead, fam, because I have some opinions.
Just one more thing, like she's if she's gay, she's a lesbian, she's married to another woman. She knows these issues and she doesn't care about that. I couldn't be friends with someone if I was that hated lesbians. If I was a lesbian, because it just would go against everything that I believe in, right? But somehow that's okay because they're both rich. And that just tells you that class and elitism surpasses all of these identities that we have. It's the bottom line is money and the class, and we have to start understanding that. So I want to talk about Tulsi's response because Tulsi's response sparked controversy. I'm going to be honest, I was not happy with her response. I thought that it was tone deaf as well. I understood what she was responding to. I thought that, let me be clear, she was responding to Ellen's response, not to George W. Bush. Yeah. But because Ellen's response was so dismissive and so tone deaf, thereby responding to Ellen's response in this way was completely also dismissive of the actual problem, that George Bush is a warmonger and that this is a class issue and that this shouldn't have been praised in any way. So Tulsi's response was, at the Ellen Show's message of being kind to all is so needed right now. Enough with the divisiveness. We can't let politics tear us apart. There are things we will disagree on strongly and things we agree on. Let's treat each other with respect, aloha, and work together for the people. Let me see if I can pull it up. But I basically, to me, that was, again, dismissive of why people were angry. Especially Tulsi being the anti-war candidate, she is here when it comes to foreign policy to tell people that, you know, stop with the divisiveness when people are with you because you stand against warmongers, you stand against regime change. It was really surprising to a lot of people to hear her say that. Now, it wasn't as surprising to me because she surpasses her message of aloha and like speaking to the other side over everything, everything. But there is a limit to that. So I want to see if I can find what I said, because I said something. And
is it in the comments?
Yeah, it's in the comment section. Oh, here it is. Yeah. Here it is. It's a little bit above there. Well, Nico said something. Okay, so let's just look at the comments, actually, Johnny, if you're there. So Nico, Tulsi's getting attacked a lot over this, right? By her own supporters. And Nico said, look, Bernie has also pretty much said things not stood up for Assange. And then he said, let's see. Nico, oh, by the way, the logic expressed by many concerned trolls in this thread, Bernie is consciously complicit in the Trump administration to not only take away the right of Assange, but Chelsea Manning as well. Then, you know, people said...
I see Corey Dobson's here. He says, I'm not going to say cancel Ellen or say rude things to her. I'm going to remind her or you of anyone else exactly who George W. Bush is. He is a war criminal responsible for the deaths of over 1 million people, in which he has all these pictures of our...
Love Curry.
Yeah.
Love Curry. Curry was the one who asked Tulsi at a town hall, will she stand up for us if they cheat again? And then the microphone was pulled away, and the question was obfuscated by Jane Elbrecht. We have an interview with Jane Elbrecht asking her how can we have unity if we don't have any accountability?
Exactly. And this
Same thing Maria Estrada asked for
and
this
this
weekend.
falls into that. I want to read Sofia Saldivar's response because she's a huge Tulsi supporter. And she said, absolutely not. Bush ignored the warnings from intel agencies protecting the al-Qaeda attack and is responsible for the death of thousands of American lives and 500,000 Iraqi lives. There is nothing to be forgiven, only prosecuted for. And that is what Sophia said. And I think that's pretty much reminiscent of how I feel.
What did Mikey, you say?
Okay. I understand your logic, but where does it stop? Right, because it seems that we need to cancel everyone. Whoever takes a selfie, okay, so this is his logic, with Obama, Biden, Clinton, who were also war criminals, albeit to a lesser extent than Bush Cheney. Tulsi has merely defended Ellen, who is naive at worst. So some people understood that she was defending Ellen, who is, I agree, Ellen is naive. She's not a politician. But I still think it was wrong of her to
I think you said it best, too. What did Sarah Abdullah say? Because she's great about that stuff.
She said, didn't realize, rightfully pointing out that George Bush is a genocidal war criminal that has the deaths and displacement of millions of Afghanis, Iraqis, Pakistanis, Somalis, Palestinians, and Lebanese on his head was divisive. Exactly. So
she's one of my favorites.
It's not divisive to point out that he is that, and this is why people are upset. And I think she should have spoken to that. And again, Chavista Misty, who is a huge fan of Tulsi, said, bad take. He's a literal war criminal. This isn't just a political differences over abortion. This is 1 million dead Iraqis. He should be shunned from polite society. But that's the thing. He's not going to be shunned by our polite society when he has millions of dollars. His family is old money, rich. They have still power. That's not going to happen. We need to take over the government in order for that to happen, right? So this is going to continue happening with our politician and a bunch of people. And here's what I said, Johnny. If you keep scrolling
right
down,
Abu Ghraib prison one, you'll see it.
My response was very pretty much diplomatic because I think she had the right intention, but I said, I love you, Tulsi, and everything you spread in the name of aloha. Yes, we should be kind to people we disagree with, but there's a line to be drawn. A lot of us who've seen the suffering with no accountability understand there must be a limit. War crimes are those limits. And so again, I disagree with her. I understand what she was going for, but she didn't need to say any of this. She could have just stayed silent. Bernie didn't say anything on this. Like, it would have been smart of her to stay silent and be advised not to take this stance. And I completely think it was the bad. What do you think?
Once again, it's not a situation where she's canceled.
Right.
But it is a situation where it's cause some concern. I think you said it best the other day. Tulsi needs to read the room at times.
Yeah.
Just stay silent on this thing. Just don't say anything. That's what I would have done. I would have done the biggest course of action was to take no course of action.
Right.
Allow people the ability in the room to be upset at Ellen for propping up and, just beautifying a war criminal.
Right.
People once again, I have no surprise in that because Ellen is part of that whole crew. Like Armin Manoogian said, she's worth $450 million. You don't get that job. You don't get to play ball. You don't get that money unless you play ball.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense? You don't get to play ball unless you play ball.
And that's the problem when you don't think that there's a class difference. Like, there is clearly a class difference. This is class warfare. And this is also, it's impacting people in ways that there's a limit. There's a limit to where you cross that line. Like, be kind to people that have committed atrocities, but they haven't been held accountable, and if any other politician said this, I would criticize them just the same. But I do want to point out something Pasta said. This isn't about canceling her. This cancel culture is ridiculous because there's a lot of hypocrisy out there with people saying, oh, she's canceled, I supported her until this, for over a tweet. I look at people's actions more than I look at the tweets, because if I looked at their tweets, I would have canceled every single person. Yeah. So let's look at some of our leaders who have unfortunately pretty much elevated warmongers before. So I want to put up AOC's tweet here. That was really bad because I hate hypocrisy. And I like to point out that I've seen a lot of hypocrisy with people on this. John McCain's legacy represents an unparalleled example of human decency in American service. As an intern, I learned a lot about the power of humanity and government through his deep friendship with Senator Kennedy. He meant to so many people. My prayers are with his family. Sure, he was dying. But if you went back to the tweet and you saw the responses, people did not like that. People were upset with her. And I think that was a terrible tweet. I remember I said, this isn't the right take. You shouldn't have said anything.
Yeah, we did a show on it.
Yeah.
We did an entire show on that as well.
Can I ask a question though, real quick? We talk about cancel culture, but what about me personally when I have like strike systems?
Yeah.
Like I said, well, I'm very mad at her of this, but if there continues to be this pattern of like, just ignorance of sorts, and like, you're supposed to understand these foreign policy affairs and what's going on. And not only that tweet, you know what I'm saying, but there was a bunch of other stuff that happened where, AOC right now, she also defended Adam
Venezuelan.
Schiff. That was like strike 2, you know what I'm saying? And like now the whole defending Adam Schiff too.
Yeah.
And then her defending what was his name? Jorge Ramos, asking those questions of Bernie and saying those were fair. I mean, there's been so many issues which I don't want to say I'm canceling somebody, but I just don't have the gumption, the hope, the love for these people. Like, I don't think I'll put on my purple AOC shirt anymore.
The fire for inside
and Pasta went, like, he was there. He was hosting.
I wore my purple shirt.
We hosted the events for AOC. I mean, he's not just someone that didn't like her. I mean, we loved her, and I think there are things that again, a lot of the tweets she's been doing are terrible. But again, I look at her actions more than her tweets, since her actions have thus far been pretty decent. So I'm going to look at the legislation she's passing. I don't her tweets by any means, but I'm still giving her the benefit of the doubt based on the legislation she's pushing.
The lack of inaction, though, at certain situations is what bothers me. It's not the actions that she's taken. She's taken some great actions, come up with some great plans. Even her bill the other day to have a nationwide rent control.
I think that's
kind
wonderful.
Of parallel to Bernie Sanders and getting that notion out there. I love that, but it's the inaction that she's taken. Remember when I told you I was upset, Johnny, because she kind of shunned Max Blumenthal? For me, when you see Max Blumenthal, you need an answer. You need to talk to somebody. Somebody who knows the region and goes to the region, who understands, who's got a big following when it comes to that, when people are really compassionate about this stuff. Right. We're murdering people. Yeah. We're killing people. We're starving people out. Sorry if I got you. You know what I'm saying? This is the inaction that bothers me when it comes to AOC. You know what I'm saying? That Venezuelan thing is really, really deep for me. Yep. The whole Jack Ryan thing, when they're putting out this movie, this propaganda. God. I mean, this is something serious here. 40,000 people are going to die because of our sanctions. Much, much more are going to starve and be injured, malnutrition. When is enough is enough? And the fact that we've all been off on this, it bothers me. And this is why, once again, when you see Tulsi Gabbard, hands off Venezuela, unequivocally. That is what we need. Right. Oh, here's your girl, Liz. What does she say?
So Elizabeth Warren is another one. George H.W., who isn't as bad, but he was still a warmonger, was an American patriot who lived his life and served our country with dignity. From joining the Navy during World War II to the presidency, his devotion to public service was unmatched. Bruce and I send our heartfelt condolences to his family. She's talked about him. And then she also, I'll bring it up later. But this is Elizabeth Warren and Barack Obama, who took a selfie. For a lot of people, Obama was a warmonger. He got us into 7 wars. He's got us into more wars than Trump has.
Too. He's got to speak for Ukraine.
He was the droner, the main droner in chief.
Fracker in chief.
He was the one that began the engagement of children, which the photographs are there, but people don't like to touch on it. So again, I'm pointing out that this is politics. Politicians are going to be friends because they're part of this political sphere. And I also want to point out, though, the difference between Elizabeth Warren and, say, Bernie Sanders and, say, even AOC is that her actions have actually been far more nefarious and damaging to people when it comes to foreign policy and the military. She sounds like Netanyahu when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And after especially seeing Gaza fight for freedom, this is disgusting. She said this: the Israeli military has a right to attack Palestinian hospitals and schools in self-defense. Hamas has put rocket launchers next to them. That's entirely untrue, by the way. She said that at a local town hall, according to Cape Cod Times. Warren, in defending her vote to send funds to Israel in the middle of the war with Hamas, said she thinks civilian casualties are the last thing Israel wants. She's painting Israel here as the victim, and she has voted accordingly. So again, I look at people's actions and their actual policy way more than I look at their tweets. So while I didn't like that tweet about George H.W., this, to me, has more of an effect, and this is why I will never support Elizabeth Warren. Now, I want to move to Bernie because it's only fair that if I'm criticizing everybody else, I'm going to point out the things he has said that have bothered me. He also said Senator John McCain was a friend and a man of great courage and integrity. We need a president who will fight for our veterans, not attack the memory of an American hero. So this is in response to Donald Trump, of course. I got him on this tweet. A lot of his supporters went after him on this tweet. We weren't very happy with it. He could have said, I send my condolences, period. He didn't have to say great courage and integrity. John McCain was a warmonger, period. And I think any sort of elevation of warmongers is wrong. And of course, was an instance where I did not agree with his tweet. I still care for Bernie.
This is the one that pisses me off.
This is the one that pisses me off.
This is the one that pisses me off.
Bernie Sanders said I would take George H.W. Bush back in the White House over Trump any day.
That's terrible.
He said,
terrible.
While I disagreed with George H.W. Bush on a lot, he was an honest man. He was a decent man. He loved his country very much. And then he told Stephen Colbert that we wish we could have a president who was honest back in the White House again. Again, this is playing to the centrist idea that anybody but Trump. We miss warmongers and war criminals. We miss them because they're not Trump. And that's a very dangerous trope to go on. And again, I disagree with Bernie on this. He's saying these things. But this is the last one I want to show on Bernie. People were wondering if this is a joke. I think it could be a joke because Bernie posted this. He said, "Happy birthday, Ronald Reagan."
It's not a joke.
He said, "We're going to close the unproductive tax loopholes that have allowed some of these truly wealthy to avoid paying their fair share. In theory, some of those loopholes were understandable, but in practice, they sometimes made it possible for millionaires to pay nothing, while a bus driver was paying 10% of his salary, and that's crazy. It's time we stopped it." Ronald Reagan said this on June 6, 1985. Ronald Reagan is the reason we have a lot of these neoliberal policies that have completely destroyed our economy, and now we're in late-stage capitalism. So to promote him in any way, it goes against everything Bernie stands for. So that's why people thought it was a joke. I'm not sure about this one, but if it is, it's hilarious. If it's not, it's really ridiculous.
I would have said I would like to thank Ronald Reagan for selling weapons to another country to secretly pay for regime change war instead of using your tax dollar.
And it's interesting because, again, I am a Bernie Sanders supporter through and through, and a lot of the tweets that he's been promoting as of late, a lot of the foreign policy I don't stand with, but I'm still supporting him because I look at the legislation he's pushing, the policy proposals he has, the way he's been consistent over 40 years. I look at that and I weight it. I'm not going to cancel him. If I were to cancel Tulsi over that, I'd be a hypocrite and would have to cancel Bernie too. That's the whole point. I think this cancel culture is detrimental to our movement. We need to be able to criticize these people, say, look, you did this wrong. You need to do better. And they usually listen. The people that like Bernie, he'll listen. He'll be like, no, this is wrong. If we're pushing him on Assange right now, that's something he needs to listen to.
Big time.
People with Tulsi, she needs to be more critical of warmongers, people like even Biden. She hasn't been critical of these people, and people have a problem with that, and she needs to listen. But if you cancel them, they're never going to know what they're doing. No. You need to make sure to let them know, hey, this is wrong. These tweets, yes, they're not actions, but your voice matters when you are a political candidate, when you're a public official.
Yeah, and sometimes they should say nothing instead of saying anything. In other words, it's not so much that you're not being critical at times. It's sometimes you're just lifting these people. You're being too positive to them. And that's the problem I have. For Bernie Sanders, he doesn't have to say anything negative about Ronald Reagan, but don't say happy birthday. Don't say anything at all. Don't glorify warmongers. Don't glorify, the people who have really put us in a jam and have just infused and inflated suffering across this country.
And I've seen people also cancel Bernie for some of the things he said, and I think that's wrong too, because again, he's been consistent. His actions speak louder than his tweets. Yeah. Half of these tweets, the majority of them aren't even from him. They're from somebody, his assistant and whatever. Like, he hasn't even tweeted in a long time because he would put his initials at the end of his Senator Sanders tweet.
BS.
So, yeah, he would put BS.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
So, fams, I mean, no one's perfect. So,
no one.
In your guys' minds, what should the ideal leader, what would the ideal leader say? Who would, the ideal, candidate, what would they say in regards to Ellen and Bush, or what would
not
they
say anything at all?
What would they say about Bush?
Either not say anything at all, or say I also
less
think
is more.
Less is more if you're running a campaign, which Bernie did. He did well by not saying anything, but at the same time, if you are going to say something, I don't think it's right for Ellen to completely be dismissive of what people are upset about. I wouldn't have said anything in the beginning. After she responded, I would have said she shouldn't be dismissive of people's problems because George Bush was responsible for the death of many, and she should listen to, as a public figure with so much influence, she should have an ability to understand this is why people are upset and not be so dismissive.
Who,
Something
Ellen?
along those lines. Yeah. Because but that's the thing. But and this shows that, this is a class issue, especially if I was someone like Bernie. I would say this is a class issue. This shows why, billionaires and millionaires that have so much money are an issue, and why we need to actually move the conversation back to what the American people need and something along those lines. But I think it's best, like Pasta said, that you didn't say anything. She didn't have to give her opinion on that. That's the whole point. Yeah. She didn't really, because these public figures, they're not going to change their mind unless there's a whole movement to do that. And that's why we're here. We're pushing this movement now.
Yeah, I understand it. And, I saw some comments, saying it was Ellen's comments, were nice and stuff, but it was again glorifying a warmonger.
Yeah.
I want to see a politician just flat out come out and say, I want to put these people on trial for the war criminals. Like, would you guys want to see that?
Absolutely.
That's what I'm saying.
That would be amazing.
But that's the
will
thing,
that ever happen?
No,
Has that ever happened?
It will,
like,
if we have this. If we, the whole thing about it is that right now it's kind of like Donald Trump is that wild card in there, and the whole thing about it is that the Republicans had a ton of emoluments in Iraq. Literally, that Dick Cheney, George Bush, Donald Rumsfeld, all these people, they injected their energy companies in there. They took over these oil fields, and they were dirty as can be. Instead of Obama going in and prosecuting these people, his party did the same thing in Ukraine. They took a destabilized country and jumped in there, and like they said, the carpetbaggers. They went in there and started grabbing all these oil, fracking and oil companies. And that's the thing that's really disgusting, because you talk about, we want a climate debate. Really? You need a climate debate? Adam Schiff. Nancy Pelosi, we're talking about an oil company, Hunter Biden, Burisma, that fracked the hell out of freaking Ukraine, not even using conventional fracking techniques that fracking would be illegal in the United States, Burisma used in Ukraine. So all these people were talking about global warming, and you want a climate change debate? Well, you got your elected officials who went in there and were very nefarious when it came to collecting oil and fracking and polluting the water. And not only that, taking money from the Ukrainian people, because Ukraine is worse off today and more poor and more impoverished than they were in 2014 when we put that friendly government in there. So Charles Pereira says, everybody a friend of Bernie as he's giving in too much to CIA talking points. The heart attack needs to give a better warning shot next time. Charles Pereira.
I don't know what that means. The heart attack needs to give.
Well, he says the heart attack needs to give a better warning shot next time. Like, it should have jolted him. It should have woke him up to stop with these talking points, because he does talk about Russiagate, which is an issue. He does talk about,
I think once again, he's trying to get these centrist votes, which I think is a mistake, because I think these centrists, a lot of them aren't going to vote for him. Period. They're going to vote for Warren, Biden, Buttigieg is another one. They're really not going to vote for him. I think, the idea is to get these independent voters, these people across the aisle. And that's why I think it's again, Tulsi is a great candidate for that, to get these votes and see what happens if she goes all the way to the convention, which she's planning on doing. So I think that's,
Ren Stern. We have a couple more coming in behind it. So Ren Stern says, Bernie
has a dirty shirt on military appropriations. I don't like what he supported in multiple countries, and that's what the hardest ding against him. I think a lot of people feel that way. Again, I think he was consistent overall 40 years in regards to domestic policy, civil rights issues, and that is why I support him. If you are a foreign policy more strict on foreign policy, then you either support Tulsi, or you're a green, or you're not, independent. Yeah. I care about foreign policy, but I think the main reason why I support Bernie is because he will be moved on the issue. He listens. He's willing to have people. Tulsi actually was his advisor on foreign policy at one point, and he was doing very well.
Right? In the Senate.
He was doing very well when he was being advised by her. Actually, because she knows what she's talking about.
Too.
Yeah. And now that she
why don't they just join together?
Exactly. I mean, I think she doesn't have some of the qualities he has, but I also think she has some of them, and he doesn't. And I think together, if they were like one candidate, I would be like, wow, this is an amazing candidate. But I mean, I have issues with both of them, But at the end of the day, the issues that are most resonate with me is why I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter, and the reasons that the issues resonate with Pasta is why he supports Tulsi. We do argue on these things. We have differences of opinion. Yeah. Pasta and I do.
And I still like Bernie. I got my Bernie
and I like
shirts
Tulsi,
and I'm ready there.
But I do have, I feel like domestic policy wise, Bernie is here. And I think that's something that's very important to me. especially right now, given the
He
circumstances.
has the trust of the people. That's the big thing. He's earned the trust of the people.
Experience, consistency.
Yeah.
All of these things.
People are still learning about Tulsi. You know
I
what I'm
still
saying?
think she has a great career ahead of her. But again, I believe both of them have an inability to sometimes, especially Tulsi, reading the room, and with Bernie, like some of the people that are being hired, he's so focused on policy, so focused on running his campaign, that some of these people that are being hired aren't necessarily the best people. And that's just my personal opinion, and the opinion of many others.
Manny says the American Service Member Protection Act, if you want war criminals prosecuted, that must be removed. Otherwise, they will never see the Hague. Is that the right word?
I think
H-A-G.
so.
What does Hague mean?
I don't know. Like in this context, I'm not exactly sure what he's.
So that's a
Like
$5
the
super chat from
outcome.
Manny.
Thank you, Manny.
Thank you so much. I'll get you back over to where you need to get over,
Okay.
girl. We got to finish this up.
Okay, so the American Serviceman Protection Act. I'm going to look into that.
We are.
Oh, the Hague is the. Yeah, you're right. No, I thought he meant the word. He meant the legislation.
Ah. Fam, you want to talk about Elizabeth Warren? On the contrary.
So, okay, I just want to point out one more thing on Elizabeth Warren, right? Because unlike Bernie Sanders, on the contrary, Elizabeth Warren's actions have shown that she is not genuine and that she just doesn't tweet things, but her actions. So when Bernie Sanders was a democratic socialist, like he still is, when he was fighting for justice and fighting against the crime bill, Elizabeth Warren was actually part of the Federalist Society, a radical right-wing group deeply committed to overturning Roe versus Wade. And she was actually a Republican then, and she was the group's honored guest. So if you have the link here, Johnny, if you can
We have the
click
video.
on it.
Yeah, what time?
Just play it for now. And then
I'm also of the bankruptcy half. Notice they wanted to separate us from the banks as much as possible. I'm reminded every time I think about that of my co-author's son when he was a little tiny boy, explaining to a buddy what his father did. And Jay at the time was practicing bankruptcy law. And he said to the little boy, he said, my father does bankruptcy. And the other little boy said, wow. And he waited a minute. He said, what is that? And the little boy looked back and he said, you know bankruptcy, exploding banks. It works. What I want to talk about today is I want to change the focus a little bit from where Judge Jones started. And that is with a, I hope, what is not junk science, and that is an empirical observation that I've made from a very young age, and that is simply that failure occurs. It just happens. People do things that they shouldn't, and they make promises to pay you back, and you know what? They don't always follow through on those promises. I learned that when Denise Thomas never paid me back the 7 cents for an orange cup. Still hasn't. In the real world, the question, when we study in law school, I think it's wonderful. Think back on your legal education. Your entire legal education was directed toward the question, with the exception of your class in bankruptcy, if you took one, toward the question of, do we have legal rights? It seems to me that what the rest of the world out there, outside the law school, is directed toward is not so much whether or not you have legal rights, it's whether or not you can get paid. If there's no dispute over those legal rights, will someone pay, or more to the point, at least when we're talking about bankruptcy, can someone pay?
Okay, so she's over there talking about bankruptcy and kind
1991.
of talking about it from a Republican standing point where, you know, it matters about getting paid back and stuff. She's not at all being the one that's like, well, you know, people are being exploited. People are unable to pay back because of the economic stress that they're having. There's a reason why people go bankrupt. It's not because they want to go bankrupt. It's literally a choice that you do make when you really, you're better off going bankrupt. It's really interesting to see her now, all these years, nearly 20 years later, you know, shifting her point of view and being propped as the anti-banker woman that goes after the big banks and goes after these people. Like, yeah, she's a threat to Wall Street. Like, no one is really going to buy that at this point when more and more stuff keeps coming out. And, you know, oh, and I missed it, Johnny. There's, of course, Emma and Anna were defending. You don't have to pull it up, but I just want to make a comment. Emma and Anna were again defending, who always defend Elizabeth Warren, were over there talking about, you know, Tulsi Gabbard this. But again, I criticized Tulsi Gabbard. Of course, I'm not with what she said, but at the same time, it's completely just so biased to not ever criticize Elizabeth Warren on not only the tweets she has made, but also the legislation she has pushed and the political stances she has voted on. She voted for 2 of Donald Trump's military budgets, to increase Trump's military budgets, to increase defense spending, and to completely ignore that. Because Emma actually said Elizabeth Warren is far more progressive than Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are you serious? Even if you don't like Tulsi, even if you hated this tweet, even if you canceled her, even if she did stuff that you don't like, there is no way in hell that Elizabeth Warren is more progressive than her, just based on the legislation alone.
Do not talk bad about a woman of color. Elizabeth Warren.
I wish I had this tweet by Breanne Joy Gray, who actually said people have been smearing Tulsi, a woman of color, and it hasn't even mattered. Yeah. And I think it's important to point that out. Like, I never even say that about her because it's not something you want to focus on. But at the same time, like, I don't feel like Elizabeth Warren by TYT is hailed to the same standard. There are good things she has done, and we've talked about it on the show, especially in the beginning. But as we have progressed in this election cycle, more and more stuff following the money has come out in regards to Elizabeth Warren. Also, her lack of integrity. And again, what we talked about yesterday, we can't even criticize Elizabeth Warren anymore on the issues that pertain to her integrity and her policy, because now we're sexist Bernie bros. And it doesn't matter that I'm a woman of color. I can't even say anything against her because I'm a sexist. And so that kind of dialogue, that tribalism of the left, that like, no, you can't say anything, is what is going to hand Donald Trump this election. You guys have to stop it. You have to stop being reactionary. Look at things from a nuanced perspective, logically, take a moment and then react. Because if we're all going to start reacting emotionally with these hot takes, then we're just going to really not resolve any issues.
Yeah.